Hi, everybody. Today is Tuesday, July 22nd, 2025, and our friend Colonel Wilkerson is back with us. Welcome back, Larry.
Good to be with you, Neiman.
Let's jump in and talk about the interview that the Iranian foreign minister had on Fox News. Here is what he said about the way that Iran sees the situation.
Respect. Obviously, it's not just the U.S. and Israel, but other world leaders who have concerns about the enrichment program. Why would you need to put it a half mile under a mountain facility to protect it if it was a completely peaceful program? That's just some of the thoughts about it. Secondly, President Trump has said he would not hesitate to launch more strikes if Iran tries to rebuild its enrichment program. So what's your response to President Trump?
Because of the, constant threats by Israelis, by, the United States in the past, we had no way but to protect our facilities and to protect our material and protect our scientists. So my message to the United States is that let's go for a negotiated solution for Iran's nuclear program.
Yeah. He wants negotiations. He wants talk with the United States, Larry. How do you find the way that Iran is behaving? And
let me just say first of all, that was such a stupid question. I mean, Israel has assassinated nuclear scientists, assassinated leaders of the military. Why are you underground? Of course you're underground. You don't want to, have such ease at doing it. At least you want to take some defensive measures. So that was such a stupid question, but typical of Fox. I continue to be amazed at the Iranians, Nima. I have to think that both the president, the foreign minister, and a couple of others that I've actually had a conversation with, and I don't think these professors at Tehran University would be dissembling, but maybe they're using the script that's been handed out. I don't know. They're trying to fool us now. That's all I can figure. I don't believe that, but that's what it looks like, because I would not be doing any of this were I they. I would be closing ranks, closing doors, closing diplomacy. I would be battening down the hatches, and I would be working fiercely to produce a nuclear weapon, because we have proven to them, regardless of their fatwa and the Islamic appreciation of nuclear weapons as anathema, and I can go along with that myself personally. I wish everyone believed that. But regardless of all of that, they live in an extremely dangerous world with a lunatic backed by an empire gone massively astray in the region, Bibi Netanyahu, a lunatic who lusts to resume the war with them and to now really take out their nuclear program. I'd build a bomb, and I presented it as a fait accompli. I might even test it as a fait accompli, as the North Koreans did, although they did it so deeply underground we could hardly detect the first one. It took a second one for us to confirm that they had actually done a test. Iran could do that too. They have terrain and depth to do that. And of course, they don't necessarily have to test. You can let the test be your first use. You still have a deterrent, because hardly anyone's going to test you as to whether or not you're telling the truth. I go back to the situation with Israel. There are people who don't believe Israel has an effective bomb. They don't believe they have it. Now, there are others who, cite JFK's very, very powerful attempt to keep Israel from getting a bomb as another reason to tack on to the conspiracy that actually assassinated John Kennedy. And I wouldn't doubt that for a moment. I don't have the bona fides to say it's true, but I do know that Kennedy was deadly against Israel getting the nuclear weapon. And I do know that he was very much for forcing AIPAC to register as a foreign agent and other things like that really made the Zionists in Israel angry. So that might have been another reason why Israel was a component of the assassination, along with the CIA and the military and others whom I'm convinced participated in that operation, whether it was rogue or not. That's what I do if I were Iran. I'm just saying what I say as a military professional. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to look at what happened to Muammar Gaddafi and to Libya and what has not happened to Kim Jong-un and North Korea. And there's only one conclusion that I can come to as a military professional, and that is the reason is North Korea has a nuclear weapon. In fact, they have probably 30 or 40 now. And that's extraordinary deterrent, even to the empire. Iran has no such deterrent, and Iran is going to be treated as a subject of regime change until regime changes or until they obtain a nuclear weapon. So as much as I hate to say I would bless nuclear proliferation in the Levant, I don't want to say that. I don't want to do that. But speaking from the Iranians' perspective, I would say build your weapon. And to answer your question, finally, that doesn't seem to be what they're doing. It seems to be that they're seeking once again to be led down the primrose path by Donald Trump in the United States and to be once again disappointed. And this time could be serious disappointment, because Israel will not relax. Israel wants a toady regime in Tehran. Israel wants a toady regime in Damascus. Israel wants a toady regime in Beirut. They've almost achieved the latter, and they're working on the middle, and they want ultimately Iran to be the same way. What do I mean by a toady regime? A regime that buckles completely under to Israel.
Laurie, do you believe that the main objective of the attack on Iran was the regime change?
I think that's what the Congress passed with regard to Iraq and Iran. We forget that sometimes. Now, the Congress will say, as they have said to me, various people in the Congress, well, that doesn't mean it has to be by force of arms. It could be by a clandestine operation, like in 1953. Or, and this is actually what one of them said to me, or it could be by the Iranian people, and I would prefer this, he said, rising up and overthrowing their regime. And this individual, I said back to, Senator, what makes you think that if the Iranian people rose up and overthrew the theocracy, which you just called it, that the replacement government the Iranian people would then accept, put in place or whatever, would have any interest in terms of security in a very dangerous part of the world, different from the current Islamic regime? What makes you think that? Because Iran is still in the same place. It's still got the same enemies, Israel foremost, and it's still got basically the same things to secure. So I don't see how that's a solution, that they rise up. And you're thinking they're going to rise up and put Thomas Jefferson in charge. And oh, by the way, it's going to be the Thomas Jefferson that was in Virginia. That's stupid. That's just idiotic. But that's what we believe. And I've found that to be the views amongst most of the Congress.
If we assume that was the case for the Israeli attack on Iran, and how can they think of a new attack on Iran? Because that's not going to happen.
I hope you're right. I hope you're right. But look at what Bibi's doing in Syria. And I think, this morning I also had a conversation with, as I was telling you before we went on the air, with an individual in Munich who's telling me about Dachau no longer has the resonance for her that it once had, because she's seeing Gaza live streamed, the genocide live streamed to her. This is happening all over, but it's not happening fast enough. The shift is gradually taking place, even in this country, polls are showing that people are questioning, as Marjorie Taylor Greene is questioning in the Congress, for example, now. A MAGA stalwart is questioning the association with Israel and not paying any attention to the American people while paying vivid attention to Israel. So it's shifting, but it's not shifting fast enough. And the consensus in this country and the consensus in Israel is that not only should Israel be allowed to effect regime change in Iran, we should help. And I've no doubt that however reluctant Trump might seem to be in offering that help, should Israel reopen the war, reignite the 12-day beautiful war, because I'm hearing also from some really good channels that Israel understands they did not do much. They did not do much to set Iran's nuclear program back. And so in the confines of his own intelligence community, Netanyahu knows that what he did was poke a stick in a bear and make the bear angry. Despite these comments being made by the president and the foreign minister, I think Israel's smart enough to know they have a real reason now to, as fast as possible, move to a bomb. And that scares them. It frightens the bejesus out of them. This isn't fake anymore. This isn't Netanyahu making things up. They really understand now that they have provoked Iran to becoming an existential threat to Israel. So they're going to take them on again. There's no question in my military mind that they're going to take them on again. And they're going to expect the U.S. to follow. And from what I've seen of Trump to this point, whether it's his mishandling of the Epstein affair or his mishandling of the NATO summit he was just at, or other things, Trump he'll follow. He may be reluctant, but he'll follow. And then we're in a real pickle, as I've said many times before, because we're not going to be able to defeat Iran to the point where we can march in and effect regime change. Iran is not the Iran we looked at in 1953. It's not the Iran that Saddam Hussein fought. It's not the Iran that we conducted operations against in Operation Praying Mantis and Operation Earnest Will. It's a very different Iran because what they did was they learned from those engagements with the United States. And they said to themselves, I'm particularly talking about the IRGC, but also the national military, never again. This is not going to happen again. We are going to work hard underground if we have to, and much of it did take place literally underground. And we're going to have the kind of weaponry that we need to ensure this doesn't happen again. We may go down, but we're going to take a hell of a lot of them with us.
Larry, Israel is not even capable to defend itself with the case of Houthis, Yemenis. But how is that going to play out for their plan on Iran? With what we've seen in the attacks, how Iran was capable of hitting any target they wanted to hit in Israel.
To a certain extent, like Hitler or Stalin even, or Mao Zedong, any dictator really, as you get deeper and deeper into your dictatorship, you begin to believe your own rhetoric. Netanyahu is at that point now. He begins to believe his own rhetoric, whether it's vis-a-vis the Druze and his battle with the government of Syria, or whether it's Iran. What Netanyahu believes is that he can, in fact, defeat Iran. He can effect regime change as long as the United States helps him. Now, that, I think, is the height of suicidal tendencies, if you will, because I think Netanyahu has embarked on the ruination of the Jewish state. As I've said many times before, Israel will not be a Jewish state very much longer. It is untenable for it to be a Jewish state. That it might survive in some other form is another matter altogether. I don't see that happening right now, but it could. So we've got a dictator who believes his own rhetoric, who believes it even to the exception of his intelligence agencies, like Trump. Both of them, same way. They make their own intelligence. And Netanyahu, like Hitler, really from about the time he invaded Czechoslovakia to the time he invaded France, where it really put the icing on the cake in the spring of 1940, like Hitler, success breeds a lot of following. Success breeds a lot of allies. Success breeds a lot of confidence from your own people. That's where Netanyahu is now, especially with that group that has taken over Israel. And let's face it, they have taken over Israel. The radical Zionists who've always been there from the very beginning in 1948, even before that. They've been killers, they've been terrorists, they've been some of the world's worst terrorists. They've been there all along, lurking in the background, surfacing every now and then going and hiding again. They surfaced with Sharon when they massacred the two camps or orchestrated the massacre of the two camps in Lebanon in 1983, I think it was. Now they're back, and they've been back. Sharon helped, Netanyahu facilitated, and now Netanyahu has capitalized on it all. So this is the greater Zion, this is the greater Israel group of people. They want all the territory they can get their hands on, not just Syria, not just Lebanon, not just Gaza, not just the West Bank, not just East Jerusalem. They want parts of Egypt, if not all of Egypt, and they want parts of Iraq, and they want all of Jordan, and they will not rest until they have it. Iran stands in the way of that happening. Fast forward a little and come up into the ether that I'm talking about when I say we're already in World War III. The United States must take out Iran in terms of it being anything other than a toady state, a state like it was, even worse, under the Shah, doing our wishes. It cannot stop China if it lets its base road initiative break through, so to speak, anywhere. Because once it breaks through, China becomes a magnet for everything that the West is doing. Iran is a place, just as Ukraine was a place where China expected to have a southern entrepot, if you will. Ukraine, a central entrepot. And I'm convinced now the reason their interest in the Arctic is so revealed, as I've found out from talking with my buddies at the Pentagon who are looking at the Arctic as a new theater of war. Now that China is looking at that, they are thinking about that being another path through which that smooth sailing that it will be eventually across really most of Russia, Northwest Passage, whatever you want to call it, that's going to be a dynamic new theater of commerce, at least until the climate change wipes us all out, maybe 50 years or so. And Russia and China are now in partnership. Russia has the dominant frontage, if you will, on that route. So now they have a central route, a northern route, and a southern route. But what's the empire done? It's blocked all three, with Ukraine, with its efforts in the Arctic, which are only now beginning to grow, and with the war with Iran. It's blocked it. And that's what we're going to continue to try to do. That's why I say we're in World War III, and we're in it with China and Russia. These are the opening skirmishes, if you will. And like World War I, they have enormous economic factors that are pushing the empire one way and China and Russia the other way. It doesn't have to be. A smart president, a smart imperial president would back off, use diplomacy, use what economic might we have left. And I say that with great sadness because if you read Steve Wertheim's article the other day, you know that 60 to 70% of the countries in the world today, about 138 countries, do more trade with China than they do with the United States. And 2/3 of that number do twice as much And if you look at any measure of economic might right now, China is winning. They're winning hands down. We're trying to stop that. We're trying to stop that. And instead of cooperating, instead of taking a second place, if you will, instead of being a country that seeks to compete, strategically compete, tactically compete with China and with Russia, and to draw upon each other's strengths and to meet the challenges we have to meet, like the climate crisis, like nuclear weapons, we're fighting it. We're fighting it tooth and nail. And as I've said before, Katie bar the door, at the end of the day, when we are losing badly, watch out, because we still have 6,000 nuclear warheads. If I were Xi Jinping or Vladimir Putin, that would be foremost in my mind all the time, is that going down, a dying elephant can thrash a lot of grass. That elephant has nuclear weapons. So I have to be very careful about how I contest this shift in power. I'm winning. I'm going to win ultimately. But I've got to be very careful about how I deal with this empire, because they have nuclear weapons and they have an absolute moron in charge of them.
Larry, you compared Netanyahu to the situation in Germany. Does that suggest that he's not going to leave power? He's not going to leave his position before destroying everything in Israel?
I think so. I would be hard pressed to tell you that I have confidence that were he to hold an election and lose it, that he wouldn't close everything down, declare himself dictator for life, and be there until his life was ended. I have no problem seeing that scenario. The only thing sort of militating against that scenario is that he is such a consummate politician within Israel. He'd be a disaster anywhere else. But within Israel, where he has so many like-minded Jews as citizens, it's hard for me to imagine him not orchestrating his perpetual win. Look at what he's doing with the Druze leaders in Syria. He's trying to recruit them as voters. I mean, this guy is probably one of the world's best politicians measured in his environment. He'd fall flat on his face anywhere else. But in Israel, with the following that he has, he's very clever. He's a propaganda genius. He lies without any compunction whatsoever. He cheats and steals without any compunction whatsoever. And he kills without any compunction. You know, the New York Times had a piece yesterday, I think. I'm reading it, and I'm saying, whoa, I copied something out of it. A quote, this is from the New York Times online version, quote, aid spots, that's humanitarian aid spots, in Gaza have become hot spots for shootings. New York Times, 22 July 25. I rarely use that abbreviation people text, you know, OMG, oh my God. I put it after that. New York Times has finally awakened to the fact that Israel is using humanitarian aid and the dispensation thereof to gather Palestinians so they can more efficiently kill them. Anywhere from 50 to 60 to 150 a day. They are killing at these aid points because that's so easy to do. It's that heinous. It's that despicable. And like the woman in Munich said, this is making Dachau pale, Auschwitz pale by comparison. One, because it's in our face and it's live streamed. You know, Dachau and Auschwitz weren't live streamed in our face. We're seeing this. And Nima, the thing I cannot understand is why isn't more of the world, not just America, I understand how broken we are. Why is it more of the world listening to someone like the rapporteur at the UN, Albanese, who's been telling the truth about this day after day after day and believing their own eyes. Are they not seeing it? Like this woman in Munich, and not doing anything. It's inexplicable to me that it's been all this time since October the 7th. And you heard the statements immediately after October the 7th from people like Smotrich and others. No one's really doing anything about it. It's just amazing, unless you go back and look at some of the other times in history when things like this have happened. I mean, here comes a boat full of Jews to the United States with Hitler on the rise in Germany. And what do? We won't let them make port. We're doing it again. We're doing it again, and we're doing it under entirely reverse circumstances. The killers, the murderers, the gas chamber operators, the slaughterers, the shooters of babies and children are now the Israelis. The Holocaust expert at Brown University, what's his name? I wrote it down somewhere. Omer Bartov at Brown University, professor of Holocaust and Genocide Studies. He now says, my inescapable conclusion has become that Israel is committing genocide against the Palestinian people. You think? I don't need a degree in Holocaust studies to tell him that that is what's happening. Why did it take you so long to come to that conclusion?
Yeah. There, here is what the British surgeon is talking about, the way that Israelis are shooting children in Gaza.
Colleagues in the emergency room describe a very clear pattern where on particular days they'll see different body parts targeted. So on one day, there'll all be abdominal gunshot wounds. On another day, there'll all be head gunshot wounds or neck gunshot wounds. On another day, there'll be arm or leg gunshot wounds. And on last Saturday, there were 4 young teenage boys, all brought in very, very rapidly in succession with gunshot wounds to their testicles. So they're clearly being targeted to their testicles. And this is a pattern that we're seeing every day, that these young teenage boys are systematically being targeted. And it's almost as if a game is being played, that they're deciding to shoot the head today and the neck tomorrow and the testicles the day after.
Yeah. And Nima, I wouldn't be at all surprised because, as Misha Glenny pointed out in his book, McMafia, Tel Aviv being one of the top cities in the world, criminal activities city, criminal activities like body organs, sale of body organs. In fact, as I understand from talking to people like Misha, that Israel is a leading state in the body part business, that's got something to do with it. I don't know that, but I mean, you know, let's don't shoot these parts today because they're going for lots of money. Let's shoot these parts. I wouldn't be surprised at that at all. That's how heinous, how despicable this state has become. I hesitate to even call them a state. They're disgusting. They have no right to be a state. They have no right to be recognized by the United Nations. They should be declared an international pariah criminal state and banned from all human activity that requires them to interface with other people who are humans. You're muted.
Yeah, we know that 25 countries.
I'll get you a headset.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a 25 countries are somehow signing or going against what's going on in Gaza. One of them is the United Kingdom. And here is what David Lammy said in his interview on BBC.
As everyone at home will know, Foreign Secretary. And on this programme, we report and we show people at home some really very distressing images at times, not the worst, to be fair, but we show people what we're able to show from inside Gaza. We had Save the Children on the programme this morning talking about the desperate situation that people are in there. Families not able to be safe where they are, and also not able to be safe to move to anywhere because moving is dangerous. The next place that is supposed to be safe isn't safe at all. I just wonder, on a human level, when you watch the news, how do you feel? What's your reaction as Foreign Secretary?
I feel the same as the British public, appalled, sickened. I described what I saw yesterday in Parliament as grotesque. These are not words that are usually used by a foreign secretary who's attempting to be diplomatic. But when you see innocent children holding out their hand for food, and you see them shot and killed in the way that we have seen in the last few days, of course Britain must call it out. Of course Britain must lead others in the statement, as I did yesterday, to call it out. Of course we must get on the phone and we must urge Israel to think again, as I did again yesterday. And we will continue to pressure. We will continue to add. We will continue to urge this Israeli government to listen to 83% of its public who are urging them now to move to a ceasefire so those hostages can come out.
David Lammy, thanks very much indeed.
Thank you.
Is the United Kingdom doing anything to put pressure on Israel?
I don't see anything significant. I really don't. As I understand it, the commerce and such is still going on just as normal. I was thinking as he was talking about, oddly enough, about 20 January 1942 and a conference in Wannsee in Germany, orchestrated and run by Hitler's right-hand killer, Reinhard Heydrich, whom the Czechs would later assassinate. Good that they did. And that's where, of course, the final solution was developed. And people forget that the records demonstrate that the final solution was to ship Jews to Poland and there kill them. That's essentially what Barnea and Netanyahu and some of the other radical Zionists in Israel have done with regard to this humanitarian aid killing ground. They have decided that this is the most efficient, effective, quickest, smoothest, swiftest way to kill Palestinians. Men, women, children, babies, doesn't matter. There's no difference, Nima, between that meeting in Wannsee, Germany, and the despicability we now look back on that meeting with, and this get-together in Israel that developed the, quote, final solution, unquote, for Gaza. And oh, by the way, let's not forget the West Bank, where it's just as bad or worse.
Larry, the second part here is what Araghchi said in his interview on Fox News. It seems that they're so obsessed that Iran wants to assassinate Donald Trump. And I don't know how many times do they need to clarify on that? They don't want to do this. And here is what Araghchi said.
Mr. The Ayatollah has said death to America, and that means death to Trump. That is from the Supreme Leader. The New York Post had the Iranian fatwa crowdfunding effort claims to have raised $40 million for bounty on President Trump's head. The campaign, organized by a group known as the Blood Covenant, comes after multiple Iranian clerics issued fatwas or death warrants against Trump. So you can see why the administration is looking at some of these signals, saying that you are doing that.
No, I think they are all propagandas. We have always said, the Supreme Leader and other officials in Iran have always said that death to America is in fact death to the, hegemonic policies of the United States, not to the people of United States. Yes, there are some perhaps radicals, persons or groups here and there in different places, inside, outside of Iran, who may say something like what you said, but that has never been our policy. and they will never be in our policy in the future. This is not our policy to kill anybody outside Iran, let alone the president of another country.
You're muted.
Why are they so obsessed with this question? Each and every time they're finding an official from Iran, they're asking that you want to assassinate Donald Trump.
They get their intelligence from the same place John Bolton gets his intelligence, and incidentally, $40,000 or $50,000 every time he talks to them. The MEK, the Mujahideen Akat. They lie, they cheat, they steal, they will say anything, they will write anything to defame Iraq or Iran. There's no truth in it 90+% of the time. Iran would be absolutely insane right now at this particular juncture in the relationship with the empire to try and assassinate Donald Trump. Nima, mark my words here, Bibi Netanyahu would conduct a false flag operation at the drop of a dime to make it look like Donald Trump was hunted by the Iranians. I'm not saying he would shoot him or kill him, but I am saying he would conduct a false flag and Mossad would be right there doing it with him to make it look like the Iranians were trying to kill Donald Trump. I'm convinced the incident in London and the incident in Buenos Aires were orchestrated by the Israelis to gain sympathy for them. This is the sort of thing they do. So this is dangerous. This is extremely dangerous. What Fox is doing is acting as a catalyst for that sort of thing to happen. They don't do their research. They don't do any kind of background analysis. They listen to the MEK as if it were the CIA. It's crazy. I mean, that's where we are, Nima. In this country, that's where we are.
You mentioned the situation in Syria, Larry. We know that there are differences within the Druze community in Syria. What is the role of Israel in somehow making these differences bolder, or maybe somehow trying to get closer to some of these factions who were not so close to Israel in order to, I don't know, to fight the government, it's not the government, this gang running, unfortunately, Syria. But what can we understand from the situation, the complexity of what's going on in Syria?
I think Israel's number one strategic objective with regard to Syria right now, and just to put Iran aside for a moment, because it all boils down ultimately to Iran, because that's the last real obstacle to Israel's hegemony in the region. And our hegemony, remember, we use Israel. I think their objective in Syria right now is to get rid of the leader. Ultimately, to get rid of that leader, because they don't like him. They don't think that he's ultimately going to be aligned with their interests. He's too much of a future possibility of opposition to Israel, effective opposition to Israel. Unlike Assad, he's got a tender base right now, if you will, I think. I'm hearing a lot from Damascus about him, and he's got to make sure that he can get every disparate element in Syria as possible behind him. And Israel has defanged him, really. All that bombing that Israel did, he hasn't got a whole lot left to fight Israel with. And this is the reason they did this, Nima. That's the reason they did it. They were planning all along of taking more and more of Syria. And so what they're doing now is using the Druze, I think, and the Druze are somewhat reluctant in their what you might call the less than leadership of the Druze. I don't think they're very willing to go along with this. But he's using money, and he's using bribery, and he's using other methods that Israel is so good at using to convince the leadership, at least, that they're better off if they side with him and with Israel, at least on a temporary basis. Now, let me footnote that and say they would be fools to do that, because he will turn on them in a heartbeat when it becomes conducive for him to do so. All he wants them to do right now is round up their people, as it were, and make sure they don't oppose what Israel wants to do. He doesn't want them in his rear when he goes deeper and deeper into Syria if they're antagonistic to him. He would love to have the majority of them on his side as he goes on deeper into Syria, which he will do, I guarantee you. It's got to be, though, an ancillary theater for him right now, because he's got his hands full taking over Lebanon, and that's his goal, to take over Lebanon, not just. We built that largest. Why did we build the largest, freaking most expensive embassy in the world in Lebanon? First of all, because it's not really a diplomatic place. It's a place for the CIA, Mossad, MI6, and others to operate out of. Second of all, because we know what Netanyahu is going to do. And we want a big place there to kind of watch what he does, because he's going to take over Lebanon. No doubt in my mind. He's also going to take over Jordan. This is what they planned at this final solution conference. They planned the greater Israel and how they're going to affect it. They're going to push into Syria. The Druze will be allies, if possible, initially, and then they'll take care of the Druze. Once Erdogan awakens to the fact that he's a day late and a dollar short, one wonders what will happen there, particularly since they're a member of NATO, such as NATO is today, and because they are trying to maintain their bona fides with the empire. Mistakenly, I think, but they are. They don't want to go fully with China and Russia yet. So all of these dynamics in the Levant are playing into Netanyahu's plans right now. But I think ultimately they're going to go asunder, and they're going to go asunder on Iran. I really think they are, because he's going to bite off more than he can chew, and he's going to drag the United States into that meal, and we're going to lose too. But as I've said so many times before, anywhere on this arc of crisis where we begin to lose badly, and I'm talking we go to conscription and nobody shows up for the draft, and we are totally out of capability to do anything conventionally, watch out. That's what I've said before. Watch out, because we will go nuclear. And you're talking about this entire arc of crisis that we've created through proxies mainly, suddenly becoming the empire's responsibility to continue execution of. We can't. We simply can't. And Netanyahu is going to be caught up in that. It's going to be Bibi's last day, if you will, in the sun, because his big daddy, his orchestrator, his teacher, his real mentor, the United States of America, is going to be in existential peril. Israel will not survive. I know people think, well, geez, World War III, that's great. That's the same way people were thinking in 1914. Same way people were thinking. Impossible, utterly impossible. And yet you had people who were orchestrating. Winston Churchill, for example, he knew it was coming. He knew it was coming because he was prepping it. Others like him were prepping it. Others in France were prepping it. They could not let Germany overwhelm their restoration of their empire. We cannot let China overwhelm the restoration of our empire. What have we been doing since 9/11 but trying to restore our empire? Actually, since the end of the Cold War, trying to restore our empire. And we've been failing. At every approach, we've been failing. We're not going to ever give that up, I'm afraid. We cannot go quietly into that second place position. We just can't. Too many billionaires are against it.
And China knows what's going on, Larry. Here
They
is
do.
what China did in the Financial Times. It shows that how China's treasury holdings have fallen below those of the United Kingdom. You see this red line goes up and coming down the blue line. You see, and this shows how China is preparing. It's 2025. You compare to 2010, from 2010, which would be the peak of the economic economic war between the United States and China. And here we are in 2025, how they have reduced it below.
Wait till you see where that line for Japan goes with their new government.
Yeah.
This is a real shock for
Yeah.
people like me who've been dealing with Japan for a half a century. I mean, I could have predicted it. I could have said it was going to happen eventually, but it is happening now. And this is going to be Donald Trump thinks he's conservative and nationalistic. This is going to be an extremely conservative and nationalistic government in Tokyo. They're even trying to use immigration as a political tool. Japan needs immigration. It's disappearing. And yet they're going to be successful because they're riding the tide of the Japanese people's sentiments. They don't like immigration. So the world's shifting. It's shifting so fast that our feet are coming out from under us.
China knows, in my opinion, knows how to play the game. They know when it comes to the foreign policy, when it comes to their role in the Middle East, in Ukraine, they know how to play.
The only
little
thing
damage, with little friction with the United States, they're doing whatever they want to do.
Yeah. The only thing they've got to worry about, and I'm quite sure Wang Yi, I don't know Xi Jinping, but I'm quite sure Wang Yi understands this, is what the empire might do in its fatal gasps in its defeat. I mean, you never know. You just never know. They've tried. Both Putin and Xi Jinping have tried. In tandem and separately, they've tried to work out a modus vivendi for to hold a hand out to the empire and say, grasp my hand and you won't go down as fast as you will otherwise. In fact, we could cooperate and we could all work it out to where you don't really go down at all, except in comparison with us. We'll do that. We'll do that for you. We have rebuffed every overture. And this president we have right now hasn't a clue to what I'm talking about.
Larry, Tucker Carlson had an interview with a German journalist, Bild, and he asked him, what is going on with Germany? Why you're so much silent about what's going on against Germany and the benefit of Germany and the future of Germany? And the guy doesn't know how to answer that. And I'm afraid that even the Chancellor of Germany doesn't know how to answer that.
Why should he? What's his experience? His experience is, I would say, ultra-conservative and BlackRock CEO. The only thing he knows about is the bottom line, and the bottom line forged in a cauldron of economic might that doesn't exist anymore. So I just, Germany has been taken down. They really have. Yeah. Starting with Nord Stream, before that really, but the focus and the concentration was too retro, let's put it that way. But Nord Stream began the process of taking that retro focus and totally unwinding it, plus forcing a lot of the people who were bringing Germany into the position of being such a manufacturing giant out. And Germany's been spiraling down ever since. I don't I don't necessarily let Angela Merkel off the blame sheet either. She didn't do much about this, and along came others who simply don't understand the world they're living in, don't understand how to deal with that world, and they don't understand their own populations either. Europe's success, in many respects, from the consolidation post-World War II, the creation of NATO, the European Union, all of that success was achieved because the people were happy. Let's put it that way. I mean, I don't mean that literally so much as I mean that they had a good system and their governments were working and they had education and they had health care and they had lots of things to do and good jobs and good manufacturing facilities. And all of a sudden, that's in jeopardy, and leaders don't realize that, and they don't realize that they're gone because they don't realize that. As soon as the elections are held, they get rid of them. God knows what's going to replace them, though. A friend of mine who is a pretty good European historian, officially and unofficially, lived there 35 years or so too, in various countries, told me the other day it's looking more and more like the Europe of old, where you're constantly contesting with your neighboring state whether or not you're better than they are or they're better than you, and you're back to squabbling, you're back to pre-World War II Europe. I don't think it's that bad, but I do think they've lost their way. And these politicians they have right now, from Merz to Starmer to Macron and others, Rutte at NATO, they don't have a clue. They just don't have a clue. They're not as circus clownish as Trump, but they don't have a clue to what's happening all around them. They don't have a clue to the fact they're losing too. They're losing. They're losing majorly. And were the three base road initiatives, North, Central, and South, to materialize overnight, then you'd have a situation, Nima, that would be not unlike Russia's situation right now, where it is so dominant over Ukraine that the dynamics of that war might change. So if all three of the BRIs were flowing, the dynamics of that might change the whole point into which they flow. That is to say, they'd swamp us. They'd swamp us, and we would not only be the lesser in terms of population and economic might, we would be much the lesser. I don't think China wants that. I don't think Russia wants that. They want to sell their gas. They want to sell their product. And they don't want to destroy those who might comprise a great market of theirs. But they can't deal with us consistently and positively if we're idiots. And that's what we're being, idiots.
Because with the increase of the military budget in European countries from 1.5% to 5%.
They're going the same way we're going. We're over $1 trillion now. With the $150 billion that Congress just plopped in at the last minute, we're over $1 trillion. 60% of that, Nima, 60% is going to contractors.
No. It's all coming from the taxpayers, from the social security programs, health care programs, and they're cutting. Because when it comes to Europe, it's somehow the government, if they do that, and there somehow would be the enemy, it would turn into the enemy of the public.
Yes.
I don't know how are they thinking about it?
Well, even Marjorie Taylor Greene, in her remarks, she is emphasizing the fact that 22 resolutions were passed in the Congress affecting Israel, 0 affecting the American citizen. That's crazy, but that's what we're doing. You could say the same thing about the defense budget. Where's that money coming from? Well, it's coming from your table. your kitchen table. It's coming from your medical program. It's coming from your insurance program. It's coming from everything that right now is barely sustaining your life if you're in the bottom 60%. Bottom 60%. And it's going to,
we're bottom 19%.
Yeah. Well, and it's going to whom? It's going to RTX and Lockheed Martin.
Yeah. It's unbelievable.
You know, we're going to have a demonstration on the triangle, the east side of the Capitol here in the United States on Thursday, hopefully. And we're going to have some congressmen with us, we hope. They've said they're coming. And we're going to feature Doctors Against Genocide. And we're going to, you know, try to wake some people up again about the horrible situation in the Levant. I don't know that it's going to do much good, but, you know, these Doctors Against Genocide will tell you some real tale, like that British doctor you interviewed or you showed the tape of. They'll tell you some real horror stories about drones flying into surgical wards and looking around and blasting a baby on the surgical table. This is Palantir and Anduril and all those good guys who are designing this mosaic program that factors in 300,000 little pieces of detail that says, oh, it's Nima. He runs Dialogue Works. Shoot him.
I somehow, I don't know if you saw the interview that the head of Palantir had. He was asked about the future of humanity. He was something, future? We're going to be something else. We're going to robots. We're going to,
Yeah.
It's unbelievable.
Billionaires in the background talking about, headed up by Steve Miller, talking about nuclear war in terms of, well, you know, the number one problem on the globe is too many people, so let's get rid of a couple billion. And we don't need them because robots and AI will take over. These are weird people, if I can even use the word people to describe them. And were I in front of Steve Miller, I would have trouble calling him a person.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Larry. We're going to wrap it up.
I'm sure your
Great
listeners,
pleasure as always.
your listeners are going, oh God, doomsday.
Because we have to be honest with what we're living in.
Yeah. Honesty is the best policy, said who? Benjamin Franklin, something like that. But it is scary, and people, I understand why people put cotton in their ears and don't want to listen, or why they refuse to watch this live stream from Gaza. If you've got any humanity in you at all, how can you watch it and not want to do something about it?
Exactly.
Take care.
Take care, Larry. See you soon.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.